Welcome to another episode of the Overcome University podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is David Shriner-Cahn, business confidant, guide, community builder, podcast host, and he's helping corporate refugees start, run, and grow their business. Hey, David, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Great to be here.
Absolutely, man. So, David, we've met before, and I've learned about your career, and it's very interesting to the point of where you working it into a podcast. Now, can you tell us how you get to this level where you transition from the corporate side of things to now being a business confidant for people that want to be entrepreneurs, people that's already in the business space, or people that's trying to like navigate things and figure things out?
Yeah. So to start with, I am a corporate refugee. I was an employee for the first 28 years of my career. In 2006, I decided rather than pursuing the linear approach, which would have been a job with greater compensation, more responsibility, etc., I would take the route less traveled and become an independent consultant.
Mhm.
And that led, as what happens with most entrepreneurs, one thing led to another. I started a podcast in 2014, and um, over time, we started serving more and more people that had a similar journey to mine, which is corporate refugee, somebody who is typically an employee for 20 to 40 years and either leaves voluntarily or gets pushed out and decides they want to take more responsibility for their career destiny. And one of the easier routes to start a business is to stay in the same discipline and start a consulting or coaching business.
I often hear that a lot. I've had some family members that got pushed out of their company because of some things due to downsizing, things like that, and they bought them out, and they were trying to figure things out in regards to like what's their next career path or next career avenue. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing something like this. If we can expand a little bit about the Smashing the Plateau podcast, can you tell us more about your podcast itself and how it has evolved throughout the years?
So it is an interview-based show, similar to yours. And when we started the podcast, one of the things that I noticed in the podcast space, which obviously has changed a lot in the last 10 years, but 10 years ago, the business podcasts that were out there, particularly the ones that were focusing on some of the challenges that entrepreneurs were facing when they wanted to build long-term success. So there was a lot of emphasis on startups. And the reality is, most entrepreneurs are not starting something, they're running something. Starting something is probably sexier and more exciting, and maybe is better storytelling. But what I found when I looked around me at people that were successful, they didn't spend that much of their time starting something. They got something to work, and they just tried to keep making it better and make the business work for them rather than feeling like they were working for the business. So I thought it would be much better to focus on what does it take to actually implement your ideas over the long term. If you're trying to be a successful entrepreneur for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, or more, what does it actually take? And that has really been the focus. So that was kind of how we started. And over time, as I said, we began in our business began serving more and more corporate refugees. So the podcast over time began to take on a narrower focus to focus on this particular demographic of what does it take to go from being an employee to being an entrepreneur when you're mid-career or even later.
So, based off your experience, David, for the people that fall into the category of corporate refugees, what are some unique challenges that you're seeing that's coming through when they come to work with you?
Well, one of the things is there's a huge amount of fear because we have drummed into our heads that paycheck equals security. And the
Hmm.
reality is, as many people know, paycheck doesn't equal security, only equals security as long as the paycheck lasts. And right. And yes, people leave jobs voluntarily for very good reasons. And they also leave involuntarily for reasons that very often have nothing to do with their performance or the return on investment that the company is getting. As you said, there are mergers, acquisitions, there's a downturn in the market, You get a new boss who's 20 years younger than you and wants to make a name for himself or herself, and they often look to um, cut headcount, right? And who do they look to cut? It's not necessarily the newly hired. It may be the more senior people, and they may also feel threatened by senior people. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into why people end up getting laid off. But so I say fear is like a big thing, and um, once you figure out that you can actually generate income on your own, one of the challenges is, okay, I'm able to generate income. And as I said, one of the easier ways is to start a consulting business. And for many people, even those that have been fired, the first client is their previous employer, because the employer still has certain tasks that need to be done.
Exactly.
And if you're good at doing those tasks, you're still a good person to do them. Maybe they don't want to do them in an employer-employee relationship, but they may do them as a consultant. But anyway, so you may have one or maybe a small number of clients. And if you want to build real stability in your business, you've got to diversify your revenue and find different sources. So if one source dries up, or maybe a particular market segment that you're focused on can be counterbalanced by other market segments or other revenue sources that will continue on if something dries up. So that actually gives you a lot more security over the long term than a single source and a paycheck. But again, that's kind of a mindset issue to get around all these things. Um, Another thing that I see happening quite frequently is, um, and I'll kind of paint it, it's the fear around um, negotiating for yourself. And what I see happening is, if you're in a high achieving position where you have a team of people that take care of all the things that you're not responsible for, you have a full calendar, overflowing inbox, this built-in social structure, and then you go out on your own and you start off with an empty calendar, empty inbox, no team, no social structure. You spend all this time alone, and what happened, right? You laugh, but what happens? The fears that are there anyway, when you spend all this time alone, they just get worse. And talking to yourself doesn't make them better. And then you have to get up and market and sell something you've never had to market and sell before, which is yourself. And
Exactly.
doing this as an employee, as an entrepreneur, is very different than negotiating perhaps an annual compensation increase as an employee. It's very different, and you've got to get used to getting a lot of no's. Um, I know one exercise some sales coaches use is, okay, let me see if you can come back to our next session with 100 no's, because um, you really have to practice hearing no a lot till you are able to sell something where there's great fit between you and the client, you and the market you're trying to serve. Yeah, so that's a huge hump to overcome. Another thing that I see a lot is how perfection is the enemy of the good. So
Yeah.
as an employee, if you are not right 90% of the time or more, you're going to hear about it. And what does the employer focus on in the annual review? It's that 10% that you did wrong, or maybe the 2% that you did wrong, as opposed to the 98% that you did right.
Right.
And the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you're probably going to be wrong most of the time. So you got to get over that. If you're right more than 10% of the time as an entrepreneur, you're often doing quite well. Business and life are a series of iterative steps to rule out what doesn't work. And you have to be comfortable trying things that are half baked, that you're not sure they're going to work. You feel like you're going to make a fool of yourself with your friends and colleagues and in the marketplace. But the more you're willing to make a fool of yourself, the better you're going to actually do.
Exactly. Let me follow up on that, David. So, for that person that you're working with, and there's so much intangibles that you just mentioned and talked about that you need to sustain and maintain and keep that going when you're getting ready to step into the entrepreneur space. What are some things when you're working with clients to help them maintain and sustain that business? Let's say, for example, they're struggling with getting those no's and no's and no's, and then they get their first yes, and now they need to start repeating that process. How do you work with clients to maintain and sustain that?
Um, yeah, so the main thing is being around other like-minded and like situational people. That's the whole reason we started a community for corporate refugees. Um, and the whole point is, if the more you connect with other people like you and share your successes, what's working well, but also share where you're challenged and where you want some feedback, the more you're going to get support from other people who understand and sort of get what you're going through. Because the reality is, and I heard this when I became an entrepreneur, the people that were closest to me thought I was nuts. They were like, you're right, you're leaving um, what sounds like a good career to do something that seems very risky,
Mm,
right? So um, you, the more you surround yourself with people that get it and understand what you're all about, they can share their own experiences of when things have worked well for them, when things haven't worked well for them, and in particular, I like there's a framework that we use in the Smash and the Plateau community of asking questions to go deeper to help the person who's sharing something go deeper. So asking thought-provoking questions and then sharing experiences that may have some relationship to what the person is going through. Because when you hear what other people have done when they've had similar experiences, that's when you get your best ideas.
absolutely. So when I think about my transition, I was managing teams, I was managing different departments and things like that. And then once I stepped into entrepreneurship, the leadership aspects and the leadership dynamics change. Can you speak towards leadership when it comes to leadership into entrepreneurship, how important that is in regards to self leadership?
Um, Self leadership is really critical. And the way I would describe self leadership is understanding, first of all, what's really important to you, what your big audacious goals are. Um, Not something that's not a smart goal that's like something metric driven and achievable, but something that is big and you can always work on for the rest of your life. Understanding where it is you're headed. Like if you live to 120, you want to be you want to find something that's going to engage your mind and all of you for as much of that time as possible. So those kinds of goals. And then um, you need to find a way to create some structure. Again, this is somewhat counterintuitive to people that um, be, when they first become entrepreneurs, we think entrepreneurship is all about freedom. Yes, it's freedom to choose how you want to spend your time, what you want to work on, who you want to serve, etc. But the more you're structured in that process, the better you will do. So as a leader, you need to be really clear about how to utilize your most precious resources, which are your time and your energy. And the more effective you can be at using those, the better you're going to be at not only leading yourself, and the better you're going to be. And with all these things I just mentioned, understanding what's important, understanding your big audacious goals, the better you're going to be at leading other people. So it really
Absolutely.
starts with right. It starts with grounding for yourself, and the better you're grounded, the better you're going to be able to lead other people. Then there are all kinds of other things you can do to learn how to be a good leader if you don't have that experience. I was lucky. I was in management and leadership roles most of my career. So for me, that part was relatively easy. I got that part. But you can learn how to be a good leader.
Definitely. So I know our listeners are listening and they're maybe on the fence. Can you share some success stories from some of the clients that you're working with and who was kind of on the fence, had a little bit of fear that we spoke about earlier, but now you're seeing them thriving since working with you as a client?
Sure. So we have one member of our community that I'm thinking of who was a longtime employee,
Mhm.
actually had a consulting business earlier in their career for a short time, but was an employee, uh, ended up getting pushed out for circumstances similar to what I've described. It wasn't performance related. Um, and was kind of struggling to get a new consulting business off the ground. And because, in particular, because of the feedback of a close-knit circle of people in our community, became a much stronger negotiator,
Mm.
and also changed their pricing structure. So the pricing structure was based on value rather than being based on time.
Yeah.
Because that's a big mistake that consultants make, is you're used to being paid as an employee for your time. And as a consultant, you should be paid for your value. So if it takes you um, 10 hours to help a client um, gain $100,000, even if you set your hourly rate at very high, it's not going to be high enough to um, to bill based on value. It's like, you go to the heart surgeon spends a few hours performing surgery, and the bill is $10,000, and nobody questions that,
Right.
right? Right, and in the business sector, if you're able to help clients overcome extreme challenges, and you can put a dollar amount on that value, then that's what you should be charging. So anyway, so this person started pricing based on value, negotiated much more strongly, um, worked on their relationships with clients and others in the client's network, and now has a thriving consulting business that is many multiple times the income that it was when they first joined us.
Absolutely. I love that. I read the book from Alan Wise, and I think it was about value-based consulting, and it was kind of the same principles and same concept that you just mentioned. I want to follow up here. So, for the person that's already the entrepreneur that's already in the space, the business owner right now, what are some key strategies for running and growing an ultra lean business? Because not everybody gets the opportunity to start off with a full team, a full department, and all those different types of things.
Well, one thing I recommend is uh, don't automate until you actually need to. So a mistake that I've seen people make is um, they spend too much time automating processes, which in the long run, if a process needs to be automated, is great. But if you don't have that much repetition in a process, it may not need to be automated yet. And because it does cost money to automate things, so that's one thing. I advise people to um, do things repeatedly till you see there's a good pattern that something is ready for automation. Another one is whenever you're trying something new, and this is true for existing business or a new business, make sure that there is good product market fit, that you're actually able to sell it before you start building any kind of infrastructure. So, for example, I know a lot of people spend time creating a website or landing pages, or um, designing a whole course before they have any customers. And I'm going to say I think that's a mistake. I think you got to get the customers first, prove that there's actually a market that's willing to pay you money. And even if somebody tells you that they're ready for something, actually get somebody to pay you money, because that demonstrates that they're really willing. Because I've seen
Exactly.
cases where somebody says, "Oh yeah, I'm very interested in that," but you send them a sign up link, and they don't sign up.
Hmm.
So sell first, build second. And yeah, I've seen, particularly for experienced professionals, you're able, once you sell something and you know you have a deadline to deliver some kind of result, I can just about guarantee you that you'll be able to create that result fairly quickly. Um, it's the Yeah, the sales process is often harder than people think.
I like that. As he was telling me that, I recall when I was trying to create my courses and create my programs, and a mentor of mine was telling me that you need to test the concept and make sure that it works before you even create anything. because I was getting ready to record videos and all these different things. And he was like, don't do that. You don't want to create a 12 module course and nobody buys it. And you just realize that you wasted your time. So it was not until I did that, tested it, somebody paid me for it. And then that's when we decided to move forward. But you're absolutely right about that. If looking back at it now and seeing that you made that transition and to the space that you're in now, what are some lessons that you've learned that you could implore on our audience right now?
There's some of the things that I talked about. I've made these mistakes too. Waiting too long to start something.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I first started my podcast, um, I had a small team at that point, and the team was pushing me to just get it going. And if
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the team and it was just me, I probably would have delayed and delayed and delayed. And if I had done that, I don't know whether I would have actually had the podcast or not. So that, that's a great example. Yeah. So just get started. And um, I have also made the mistake of spending too much time and money building things before I've sold any of it. So I can, yeah, I can count many examples. That's one I've learned the hard way.
So, seeing that you're working with many entrepreneurs that's coming through your doors, right? How can you help someone, or what are some advice you could give someone to now get a business to be scalable?
So to be scalable, that's very different than being profitable.
Mm-hmm.
At least to me. To me, scalable means that the business is not about you. It
Mm-hmm.
means that you can put in less and less time and make more and more money. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to let go, delegate. I had a podcast guest just recently, Gina Kuttner, who created a virtual assistant business. And I don't know that she necessarily intended to scale it this way, but she ended up hiring two key people, one to do operations and one to do marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And they run the whole business. She spends 5 to 10 hours a week in her business. She has a lot of free time now. And it's like that's a scaled business in my opinion.
I like that.
Right.
I like
And
that.
right when she started it, she was initially it was her. She was the virtual assistant. And then she started getting inquiries from potential clients and she couldn't serve all of them. And she started finding people to work for her. One thing led to another. But it was really when she got to hiring the management layer that things really scaled.
Awesome, awesome. So I kind of asked you that reason for to preface my next question, but you're currently right now on vacation, and I was saying to myself, how can someone create this healthy work-life balance and have and run a business as an entrepreneur as successful as yours? So can you talk a little bit about the work creating that balance for yourself as an entrepreneur? As I know, I list some people may be on the fence, as I just mentioned before. So can you talk a little bit about how do you maintain that? How do you balance that when you're an entrepreneur working for yourself, creating your own time, creating your own schedules and things around that?
It's a great question, Michael. And here I am on vacation, and I'm a guest on a podcast. So, right, it's never 100% just no business. It's also never 100% only business. So I try to integrate everything that's important to me in my life
Mhm.
all the time. And I think most people that are entrepreneurs don't ever go a day when they don't think about their business.
Yeah.
But that's different than spending 15 hours a day working on your business or even spending an hour a day working on your business. You can, we just talked about scaling. So if you can, there are different ways that you can build in non-work time in your life and still be able to pay your bills. So delegating is one. If you have a team and you delegate, that's great. Another way you can do it is if you have partners, and different partners take the major responsibility different times of the year. It's like,
Mm.
if you have three partners, each one wants to take a month off. So you just make sure that all three don't take the same month off. Right. That's another, but you have to trust your partners. So,
True, true. Yeah.
that's right. That's another way to do it. You can design a business where the business doesn't actually have to function 12 months out of the year. For example, there are seasonal businesses, right? Like let's say you are you're in the retreat sector. You run retreats. Let's say you just run retreats for 2 or 3 months in the summer and 2 or 3 months in the winter. You take all the fall off, you take the spring off. As long as your business provides enough net income for you to support your lifestyle, that to me that seems like a great balance. And then and again you figure out what kind of business is going to work with the kind of lifestyle you want. So one of the things I mentioned to you that's really, you need to figure out what's important to you
Exactly.
as you're right. One of the things that you need to see is, okay, besides who I want to serve using my professional skills and experiences, what's important to me in my life? What kind of schedule do I want to work? Where do I want to live? Who do I want to spend time with? And figure out when you try to integrate that with how you're going to generate income, what kinds of income generating activities will suit that lifestyle. Because if you end up designing a business, or even when you're an employee, if you take a job that is going to be completely at odds with your lifestyle, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
I know many of us have experienced those things where we feel totally boxed in the kind of job we've taken. And the same thing can happen with your business. You can box yourself in the kind of business that you've created. And then you feel like your business is running you, and you have this boss that you hate even more than the boss you used to have in corporate. And then you look in the mirror and you go, oh, that boss is me. What do I do now?
So we were just speaking about finances, and I think that's one of the biggest things entrepreneurs think about is income producing activities. How am I going to generate revenue, make revenue, sustain revenues, and things around that? So what are some practical steps entrepreneurs can take to improve their financial management and skills?
If you don't know how to read a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement, learn how to do it. That is money well spent. Get
Mhm.
somebody to teach you. I mean, there's a lot of resources you can access on your own. Whatever learning style suits you, understand your finances. The sad thing is, in America, nobody teaches personal finance. Nobody teaches you how the whole credit system works. If you can understand those two things, they're an anchor for a lot of what you need in life. So
Mhm.
understand personal finance, business finance, understand where you can access capital, how you can access capital should you need it, understand how you can mitigate loss of cash flow. The biggest reason why businesses fail is because they run out of cash. So I had a guest, a podcast guest years ago, who said um, he wanted to have, um, I think it was a year's worth of expenses saved up just in case when he left his job, and it ended up having 3 years worth of
Wow.
expenses saved up just in case, right? Which is remarkable, because
Wow.
that gives you a lot of flexibility to weather all kinds of storms, because the storms do come. And they say cash is king or queen. So understanding money is really important. And I would say I'm a big believer in planning. I don't think there are certain circumstances where you need a 40-page business plan. Like if you're looking for financing, you're probably going to have to produce one. But the reality is, for most of the kinds of businesses and the kind that we're talking about on this episode, you don't need a really detailed plan. But what you do need is a fairly sensible financial forecast. Because I've seen too often when people have sort of pie in the sky dreams, and they're if they have to actually put together a financial forecast, it doesn't make sense, and they're not pricing high enough, um, or whatever the reasons are. But you really have to understand your numbers. I would say that's like really key.
Exactly. Before we get ready to wrap up here, David, I wanted to touch on something that I think impacted a lot of people that wanted to step into the entrepreneur space. I recall when COVID-19 hit, businesses, companies went into a whirlwind. People quit their jobs. People wanted to do entrepreneurs. Business got shut down and all those things around that. When you look at the landscape of entrepreneurship, can you talk a little bit about what do you foresee when in the near coming future when it comes to entrepreneurs?
I think entrepreneurship is actually going to grow a lot because the flip side is loyalty and longevity in jobs has decreased substantially over the last generation. I know that when I got out of school, the assumption was you were going to go to work for one entity and maybe have several different jobs within that entity, or maybe you'd have work for two or three entities over the course of your career. And this also predates the current retirement system in the U.S. Right, the retirement system is self-funded with through
Mhm.
401ks, IRAs, etc., and the government provides a little bit through Social Security, but it's very little bit, and we don't even know that that's going to last. Right, so you're on your own, and there was an assumption that you would go to work, and the company would support you in your retirement years. Um, so we've seen that whole system erode over the last generation and a half, and now job length has become shorter and shorter. And um, I think companies are even quicker to lay people off when there's a financial issue or a political issue or whatever. So I think entrepreneurship is only going to increase. And I think the sooner you learn how to take care of yourself economically through income you can generate on your own, the better off you're going to be.
Absolutely. What are some lessons? What are some tidbits or anything that you could share with our audience that is currently on the fence again, or just wanted to get into entrepreneur space or wanted to leave the corporate space? Based off like your experience, man, the podcast and the company and the business that you've built, what are some key takeaways that could take from your experience?
Um, yeah, it's kind of to fill in. Um, it's kind of the framework that I have used over the course of my career. I talked about understanding what's really important to you, having big goals, but then you have to get practical. Like, okay, so you have these big goals. How are you going to actually work toward them? And that's where having clear metric driven objectives comes into place. I like using a 90-day plan for objectives. It's long enough so that you can work on something significant, but not so far out that it seems overwhelming. And then break down those 90 days. And again, have them very metric driven. So you know at the end of the 90 days whether you've achieved your objective or not. And if not, then why not? But for the 90 days, have a weekly plan with one or two major activities per week, because more than that is overwhelming. For many people, just getting one or two significant activities done every single week is going to be a stretch. And then the key piece that I mentioned earlier is connecting with thought partners around your implementation of these weekly plans. And that's where you'll see a community like ours, or people being in a mastermind, someplace where you have trusted people that are like-minded and like situational, excuse me, that you can connect with regularly about what you're working on. And then, excuse me, keep doing more of what's important. More of what works and less of what doesn't.
And
And
thank you for that
we
sound
actually,
advice. Go ahead. I gotta finish.
sorry, what I was going to say is we have a checklist that kind of runs through these steps, which I'm happy to share.
Absolutely,
And
I would love that. So,
yeah, I was going to say you can go to smashingtheplateau.com/checklist and download a free copy.
got you. So, how can people book you on their podcast, be a guest on your podcast, or work with you to join your community?
So if you're interested in having me as a guest on your podcast, you can go to smashingtheplateau.com, click on get in touch, and just send me your information. If you want to be a guest on my podcast, go to smashingtheplateau.com, click on be a guest, put your information in there. We'll review it, get back to you. And if you want to learn about the community, go to smashingtheplateau.com, click on the community button, and there's a whole description of how it works and how to apply.
Well, thank you for that, David. It's been awesome to have this conversation with you, man. It's been an absolute pleasure to learn from your experience. I hope our audience has some key takeaways, man. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Until next time, guys. God bless.
Ain't it all? Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.